Hey guys, so we are going to go through the last two sections. So we got thoracic cage and then development. So thoracic cage, what are the parts? We already went over the vertebral column. So on the thoracic cage, it's the ribs. The ribs and sternum are going to be our major components of the thoracic cage. And so with the sternum, let's go through parts. You definitely need to know parts of the sternum, bone markings on the sternum, on the lab practical for sure. So in the the biggest part is going to be the body in the middle, is the body. And then there's two things on top and bottom. So on top, we're gonna have a bone marking called the manubrium. And then on the bottom, there's gonna be a bone marking called the xiphoid process. Manubrium is kind of like a shield looking plate looking part up there. And the xiphoid process is more kind of pointy down here. And they always mention it during CPR that it could be snapped off when undergoing CPR. Those are the three major parts. Body, xiphoid is down at the bottom. On the inferior portion, on the superior portion is manubrium. So let's talk about other bone markings, specifically on the manubrium. So up there, there's going to be the jugular notch. So right here in the center is the jugular notch. That's this part right here. And then off to the sides are where the clavicles, these little guys, are going to attach on. So you're going to have clavicular notch on either side there for the clavicles to attach onto. That's pretty much the major markings on your sternum. Clavicular notch, jugular notch, manubrium, the body of it, and the xiphoid process. Down there, did I leave? Sternal angle, okay. So where the manubrium meets the body, sternal angle, sure, we'll put that on there. Ribs, what about the ribs? So we mentioned ribs before in the previous video, but this is where we get to see them and count them out. And I really like this image from OpenStax. So it literally counts the ribs for you. Because when we talk about, oh, well, you've got 12 ribs and these are true and these are false. Well, what do you mean? Why are they true? Why are they false? So with ribs numbers 1 through 7, see they've got them numbered over here, all the way to number 7, they are going to then, here's the end of the rib right here. And then all of this is going to be the costellar cartilage, this hyaline cartilage. Anytime you see costal, it means ribs. So the costellar cartilage, number 7 is going to come across and it's got its own. So all of these true ribs, the true ribs are going to articulate directly with the sternum via costellar cartilage. The false ribs connect indirectly. So those may connect with the cartilage or they may not connect at all, but when they connect, they combine. So here we've got 8, 9, and 10, and their cartilage all merges together. You see how we've got it together, and then it bumps up here. So 8, 9, 10 are considered false. 11 and 12 are also considered false. 11 and 12 are down here. Whoop, can't see them, but they're back here. They don't have any costellar cartilage. They are floating. 11 and 12 are floating. They are still considered a false rib. So anything, rib numbers 8 through 12 are falsies, and out of the falsies, 11 and 12 are the floaters. 1 through 7 are going to be true ribs, where they connect directly to the sternum with its own costellar cartilage. Those are the ribs. So we can see a pretty picture from Pearson that's going to show you those cartilage again. What about parts of the rib? We've got the body or the shaft. There's going to be the superficial surface. That's where the costellar cartilage is going to attach on. There's a little groove in there. I don't think we need to know that at all on our bone markings. So I'm not going to worry about that. There's an angle where it bends around. And then we do need to know that there's going to be the head. So the head, we're going to have these facets here where it's going to attach on. And this whole thing, capitulum. And then there's this tubercle. So that's where it's going to attach on. We've got one here, and it's kind of, they can look, all these facets look like kind of like suction cups to me, where they're just going to whoop and attach on. So here is that tubercle, what I was telling you, attaches on to the transverse process. And then here is going to be our articulating facet here on the head. So that's where you can see tubercles here, and the head attaches here to the vertebrae, to those thoracic vertebrae. And then how does your chest work? How does it move? Every time you breathe and the lungs expand, and we have to make room for those. We got a whole bunch of muscles that we're going to talk about, our internal and external. Intercostals, the muscles in between the ribs. You'll need to know those. But I was mentioning CPR and pushing down on the sternum. So it kind of acts, they mentioned like a bucket handle, but you can see when it's up, and then as you force it down, what happens in the sternum can move down, and it can kind of articulate with that with the costellar cartilage. It can move. It can move. All right, so that finishes up the rib section. No, in the thoracic section, no, the sternum and the bone markings for sure on the lab practical. And then no, the ribs, true ribs, false ribs. How many of them are there? Embryonic development. So when we get to AP2, we'll go into way more detail, but we have mentioned that there are 3 germ layers, right? We mentioned that in the beginning chapters. So there was an endoderm on the inside, endoderm in yellow here. And then there's going to be a mesoderm, and that's going to be all your stuff in the middle. And then ectoderm is the stuff that forms on the outside. So ectoderm is all blue germ layer. And meso is the middle, and then meso is red here. And then endo is going to be the stuff in yellow that's furthest inside of us. Well, you think outside of the body, hair, skin, nails, okay, that makes sense. But your endoderm is also going to produce your central nervous system and your peripheral nervous system. It's going to produce your nerves. So we are going to have that happen at week 2. So that is basically the time that mom is missing her period, and she's like, wonder what's going on. So mom may not even know she's pregnant, and that neural tube, that spinal column, is forming in 2 weeks. So if you were thinking about becoming pregnant, if that's on your plate, possibly take prenatals ahead of time, because the folic acid in the prenatals has been shown to possibly prevent neural tube defects, and that is forming again as early as week 2 is when that neural tube starts to form, and that's coming from those outside tissues, and it folds in. So here's our outside tissue, that ectoderm we were talking about, and you can see it starts to fold and it starts to invaginate, and now here's the leftover ectoderm, but we have now formed, here's our CNS, and then we are going to have PNS right here. So that's neurulation. We'll go more in depth when we get into the nervous system chapter, but just letting y'all know, giving you a little heads up on neurulation, that the nervous system is coming from that outer germ layer, the ectoderm, and it folds in, and it starts as early as 2 weeks. So by 7 weeks, we have started to form those critical areas in the body. We can see that there's a head. I mean, at 7 weeks, we look like aliens. We do. We look very similar to other vertebrates out there. If you looked at our embryo at 7 weeks and you look at a chicken embryo, we really look a lot alike. We all look like aliens. We're all going to have these repeating segments that are called somites. See how these all repeat, these repeating segments? These are somites. We got limb bud. We have eyes. The ears are in places that they shouldn't be. They're low. We look like an alien. But we are starting to form all of the different systems going on here by 7 weeks. And the skull bones are forming. We're talking about intramembranous and endochondral that we talked about. That's happening here at this time. Then bones start forming, baby's growing and developing. All the systems are coming online and looking great. And baby is born at the end of 9 months, hopefully. And when baby's born, if anybody has seen a brand new baby, newborn baby, babies have soft spots. So you got to be really gentle with them because they can't control their head. Remember, we talked about this muscle control is not there. So you have to control baby's head, and baby has soft spots on the head. So the soft spots are called fontanelles, and it's because the bones haven't fused all the way there. So we learned, the frontal bone, and look, the frontal bone, we got 2 pieces. Our parietal bone, on this side and the parietal bone over here. And we have that sagittal suture here, but there's a soft spot here. There's a fontanelle. There's a fontanelle between the parietals and the frontal is this huge one right here, this huge fontanelle. And then we're going to have another posterior fontanelle as we go back towards the occipital bone. So we have little soft spots all over the place. And it's because the bones aren't totally hardened up. We don't want the bones to totally harden up. Why don't we want the bones to totally harden up? Well, your brain is growing crazy. Your growth rate in your brain from 0 to 5 years old is crazy fast, and it outpaces the bone growth. And so you need that space for the brain to grow. We don't want the brain case to harden up with the brain still growing inside of it. We don't want the skull to ossify ahead of time. It needs to be this balance as the brain grows and the bones grow around it. There is a disorder called craniosynostosis where it is ossified and those sutures have formed too early. I've actually got a friend from high school whose child has this. It's relatively common. It's one in, I think the textbook said put it in the notes. 1 in 2,000, yeah, 1 in 2,000 births has this, and it's where the bones have ossified and fused closed, and we're not seeing the fontanelles, and it can allow for brain growth, and it can vary. It could be just one suture fused ahead, or it could be multiple sutures, the whole thing fused ahead. So it varies. Some factors may be genetic that lead to this condition. Others, we're not quite sure what can cause this. But I do need y'all to know what are the soft spots. They are called fontanelles, and it is to allow and accommodate for brain growth going on in baby. Another picture, look at that big old soft spot right there. I remember you can actually see it when I think it was my middle. He was not a happy baby in the evening times. He was just super cranky at evening times. And so I would take him because I was the calm one. And when he get really fussy, you could see his fontanelle. It would move because his brain was just really upset and his blood pressure was getting really high. And you could see it. You could see that soft spot moving. Those are fontanelles. So that finishes up the rest of chapter 7. Let me know if you have questions.